Hey, it's Jeremy from Jeremy.net. I'm a comic book artist, writer, creator, self-publisher, and I share my creative process here with you online. If you'd like to support this channel, get additional bonus live streams twice a month, be able to read my comic books for free, and more, you can go to patreon.com and become a subscriber. It's patreon.com/Jeremy, patreon.com/GERIMI. If you'd like to get a free digital sketchbook, get work in progress animated GIFs delivered to your inbox once a month, along with, little blog posts about my creative process, or just what's going on in my creative life. You can sign up for my monthly newsletter at newsletter.jeremy.net. And if you would like to purchase physical copies of my comic books, or if you read digitally on Kindle or Comixology, which are now becoming one, finally, you can go to amazon.jeremy.net. They'll forward you to my Amazon author page. You can pick up books like my first graphic novel. It's a self-contained psychological thriller called Eye of the Gods. It's about a man cursed with visions he cannot control. Or you can pick up volume 1 of my current project, Morning Star. It's Lucifer's Fall from Heaven, told as a Western. So it's an 8-issue series. This book contains issues 1 through 4. And if you have been keeping up with the individual issues of Morningstar as I've been releasing them, the final issue is out. It's a 40-page comic, almost double size. Normal issues are 24 pages. So it's a 40-page finale to Morningstar. This is Morningstar issue 8. This is only available at jeremy.net and at Comixology in digital formats. All right. Now with that, let's get into today's stream. So I am doing something a little bit different. Well, not super different. You've seen me do master studies before. And I tend, as I've said many times, I don't draw to do exact duplicates of what I'm looking at. I'm drawing for understanding. I'm drawing to try and analyze, deconstruct, and take apart whatever it is I'm studying. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to continue doing that, but I'm doing it with work that is actually intended for exact replication. Let me see here. It's be easier if I actually go through my photos. So there's an artist, Charles Bargue. Let's send this to Procreate. Might as well get a couple more while I'm here. To Procreate. We'll just grab a couple that I was planning to start drawing anyway. What else? Couple of challenging poses here. Take these two. I can always come back and get some more if I'm able to get through all this. So the difference here is the purpose that these drawings are usually intended for. Because Charles Bargue, his work, actually is intended to be replicated exactly as you see it. So, let's see here. Is it just me, or did it only bring in one of those drawings? It looks like it. All right, well, doesn't matter. So, studying Charles Bargue, he's usually someone who, when most people study him, there's a whole book called the Charles Bargue Drawing Course. And it's a large book. It comes with, along with instructions and just discussion about the process of figure drawing, breaking drawings down into contour, and then building them into volume, and then rendering them. A large part of the point of his course is to study rendering. That really is kind of what the point of the Bargue course is. And you study it simply by, he gives you very simple diagrams for you to duplicate just exactly as he has them there. So that is the usual purpose of the Bargue drawings. However, for me, yes, I can always learn to use how to render better. I feel like rendering is one of those things that it is one of the fundamentals. It's just one of the more advanced fundamentals. But for me, instead of trying to duplicate the rendering on this, I still find it useful to use these to do just simple structural drawings, drawing cylinders and boxes and simple gestures. The advantage I find, the reason why I'm using the Bargue course for that, even though that isn't the intent, is because it's a great collection of beautiful drawings. The book is just chock full of just amazing, beautiful artwork to draw from. So I'm like, you know what? I've got this collection of great drawings. Why not use them? Why not just study just general the same type of thing I would do if I were working over my own figure drawings and trying to improve them. Just use that same approach, but studying from Charles Bargue. So what I've been doing is drawing, let's say, I've been drawing multiple sketches. So I'll take this drawing here. Let me see if I need that a little bit lighter. Yeah, that's about right. What I've been doing is doing 2 different sketches for each Bargue drawing. So the first sketch really is just me looking at the gesture, because I find that something as simple as converting the upper body, converting the torso, move this over a little bit more, converting the torso into just 2 boxes, one longer and more rectangular for the upper torso, and then one a little bit more square for the lower torso. That act alone has really helped in terms of improving my sense of volume. So what I've been doing, the way I've been using these to study, is I'll do a simple sketch where all I do is draw these 2 boxes that you're seeing right here, and then just simple stick figures for the limbs. Also, I will draw a box for the head as well. So just, very simply trying to say, all right, these are 2 boxes, and, I can put some space in there or a line in there to kind of complete that sense of drawing through the figure. And try to kind of place the head, get that sense that we're looking at really more of the side of the head than the front of the head. It's not even a 3/4. Adjust that lower plane. Because from the looks, to me, it looks like we would be seeing just slightly the underside of the head. Not necessarily that we're coming at this head from a low angle, more that we are more that we're just underneath it. I mean, that the head is slightly angled away from us. That neck is a little too short. I'm going to erase that. I know that drawing digitally, one of the big advantages is if something is too long or too short or it's in the wrong place, you can just loop it and then drag it up. But because this whole thing, part of this is about volume, part of this is about improving proportion. So while I could just grab it and drag it up, what I'd rather do is take the time to say, all right, let me assess what I did incorrectly and try to just redraw it correctly in a very simple manner. Because these, I mean, obviously they're just, they're just cubes. It shouldn't take me that long to draw this. Or it shouldn't take me that long to erase and redraw something that's wrong. Hey, let's see here. Mighty Geek Studios is in the chat. He says, I find it amazing that beginners want to bypass the construction process of a drawing. Well, I think that that is endemic of the digital age of, well, the social media age of art making, where we see artists share these very amazing, brilliant, finished works of art. And perhaps artists who aren't as experienced will see that and think that these amazing works of art are just supposed to flow out of their pen or they suck, when they're not shown all of the development that goes into a drawing. You know, the multiple times that a drawing may have been drawn and redrawn, different studies. I mean, let me put it, just the fact that I'm doing studies of this. I mean, I've been drawing for decades, and I still feel like I have not mastered the construction process. Now, I will gladly admit that part of that may just be that I may not be as talented as others. But I will also say that a large part of this, most of the artists I know who I consider to be of a high caliber and quality, they've done exactly what I'm doing. They just have put more time into doing it than I have. When I'm only able to draw, maybe 1 hour a day, as opposed to somebody who's drawing 7 or 8 or 12 hours a day, of course they're going to accelerate faster than I am. I can't be jealous that they are farther along in their craft than I am. All I can do is say, all right, I know what I should be doing. Let me try and put some time let me try and put more time into this than I've done in the past. I would still say that at no point in my life have I ever really put as much time into drawing as I have. And whatever skill I have in making art is more a factor of the amount of time. I mean, the number of years I've been drawing. It's not the fact that I've put in the hours. So I think you could get to where I am in a few years of really intensive study. I mean, I think that's why a lot of artists will come out of a really good illustration program, and they come out, better than a lot of people have been drawing for years. Because if you're working with a good instructor, studying from a good instructor, then you can say, all right, your classwork is going to consist of you drawing for 6 hours a day plus in class, plus you may have a few hours of drawing a day as homework assignment. And if you're doing that over the course of like 3, 4, 5 years, then yeah, you're going to come out with incredible composition, rendering, draftsmanship, anatomy, proportion, all of it. I went to a fine art program, and it was a program that was aimed at art galleries. I've mentioned this before. It's just the fact that my program was not specifically geared towards illustration. And because of that, I did not learn the drawing fundamentals were not really that important in the program that I was in. And if it's not that I can't put it all on the school, because it's not that they would not have taught me that. It's that I did not know that I could ask as a student, I could say, hey, these are things I want to learn that you aren't teaching. Can I do an independent study? Can you teach me this on the side? What extra work can I do to get the information that I want to get? And I think that's one of the downfalls of the education system, is that, young people don't necessarily know that they can ask for things that they aren't getting. You just feel frustrated that you aren't learning what you want in school. And you think, oh, well, school sucks, or this particular school sucks. I just want out, or art school isn't for me. Let's see. Mighty Geek Studios also says most of us have not mastered the construction process. Yeah, that's why I keep at it. Ranok, I believe I'm saying that. If I'm mispronouncing it, let me know. But Ranok says, "Yo, thanks for popping in. I'm doing some studies from Charles Bargue. I should write that on here because you guys don't necessarily know who he is. Turn the opacity up. Charles Bargue Drawing Course. And this is a book, not a digital course. So most people, as I said earlier, study the drawing that's up top is from the book. Most people do study this not the way that I'm doing. They study it to try and duplicate exactly what they're looking at. But it's such a great collection of drawings that I cannot help but say, hey, if I want to just do some studies to work on gesture and volume and construction, why not? I have the book. It's a great book. Why not just use them for my own studies? Now, as you can see, I'm redrawing the same sketch that I did up above. I'm redrawing that again, and it's not going to be exactly the same. I mean, ideally it should be, but because I'm drawing and talking at the same time, my capacity for perfection and accuracy is a little bit inhibited by that. So you guys have to bear with me in the fact that, it's not going to be perfect. But I think learning to draw while distracted is also a useful talent. Now, the reason why I'm drawing it again the second time is simply because all I'm going to do is add the add volume to the limbs now. So when I started drawing, what I drew up above, that is usually what I use as a gesture. It's just a couple of boxes and then stick figures for the limbs. And I would also normally, I would make sure that I indicate the hands, the feet, the direction that these things are. Like if the hand was hanging down, normally I would add all those things in my gesture as well. I'm not adding them here because I'm drawing from, a sculpture that's missing hands and feet. And this exercise of doing these studies, you can just as easily do these with photos of sculptures. That's a great thing as well. And I do actually have a book that's a collection of sculptures from like the Renaissance to as far as like ancient Greece. Hey, more folks rolling into the chat. Let's see, Amar's here. Says what's up, hello, and to everyone else, hello. Thanks for popping in. So yeah, normally I would make sure that I include the hands and feet in the gesture, but because this sculpture that I'm studying from does not have that, I'm leaving it out. And it might seem kind of redundant to do this exact same gesture drawing twice, but I find that leaving that original gesture that I drew up there, leaving that to look at it while I'm doing more not more detailed studies, because I'm not going to get detailed. The point is simply to make it feel more volumetric. But I think it's possible if a pose is complicated or drawing's complicated, there's a lot of anatomy, it's very easy to get lost in that anatomy and not keep in mind just what are the simple volumes that you're trying to describe. So I think having that little stick figure up there above me, it's just kind of useful to have that there, not as reference, but as a reminder to keep this simple, to look for just the most basic of forms. Because that is the real goal for me in this exercise. So now it's just a matter of taking the elements that are here and converting them all into, basically converting all of the limbs into cylinders. And depending on the angle or what it's connecting to, maybe instead of a cylinder, I might convert a limb into a box, an elongated rectangle as opposed to a cylinder. But for most of these, cylindrical shapes seem to do what I'm trying to do or convey what I'm trying to convey. And erase a little bit of this out. To be honest, I could go even lighter with my original sketch, because I'm looking now as I'm drawing these cylinders in, and I'm realizing that if I were a little bit lighter in the construction, well, it might make it harder for you guys to see what I'm doing, but it would be closer to my process when I'm drawing traditionally, where I'm trying to draw as light as possible in this stage. And I need to have this knee facing more towards the viewer. I need to get a little bit more foreshortening in there. This is great practice for thinking about things in terms of three-dimensional objects, thinking about them in volume. It's also a great practice just for drawing ellipses, because you've got to figure out what angle of an ellipses you want a form to have. Because the closer to a perfect circle this ellipses at the end of the leg is, the closer we are to looking at it as a foreshortened form. And that is exactly what I want it to appear as. I want it to look like a cylinder that's coming down. And then by the same token, the lower leg is going away from us. It's not going away as an extreme angle as the upper leg is coming towards us, but it's still, really, shooting away from us as well. I can kind of put showing a little bit of a gap there. And an interesting thing is, for a long time, I have spent trying to really refine my sense of joints and really, make to understand them as spatial forms. And I go back and forth between trying to really well define the joint to give you that sense of this is where the object is turning. And sometimes I find that it's almost easier to clearly define the limbs themselves and almost leave that joint as the fact that it's sort of an in-between form that's not quite heading the one way and not quite heading the other. That helps to sometimes define or explain what's happening with the joint in terms of the change of direction. So I know I sound really wishy-washy in terms of the way I just explained that, but what I'm trying to say is sometimes I try to very clearly define the joint in which way it's turning, and sometimes I try to just say this one form is heading one way, one form is heading another way, and then there's some space in between, and that space is the joint. And sometimes that lack of definition of being one or the other describes it better than if I were to really try to create an accurate representation of a turning form. Or rather a form that's in between two forms. But I mean, that's the same thing as, when I'm drawing this rib cage, I could just as easily have drawn the upper torso, as an elongated ellipse, like an egg shape. And it depends on what angle you're looking at the rib cage. That very strongly can define which what type of primitive form you use to describe it. For any shape, depending on the angle you're looking at it, you may find like sometimes a wrist ends up being, a circular form. Sometimes it ends up being like a flat, like really short brick. Now that I've got most of this drawn in, I may come in and go a little bit darker. So my goal here is, again, not to try and replicate the level of anatomy that's in the drawing that I'm referring to, the reference drawing. It's more just, am I drawing forms that look like they are moving in the directions I want them to move? I can kind of put another circle on top of this ellipse. That's just sort of should represent the kneecap floating above all of this. In fact, I'll kind of bring the ellipse that's the upper thigh, bring that back a little bit to try and create that sense of this form. I think that works. If I have this ellipse overlapping both the upper and lower leg ellipses, then you get that sense of, okay, here's a form that is floating in between these two forms. And that's what I want to convey. Part of the reason I've been doing a lot of studies like this all week, and part of that is because I'm in between figure drawing classes, so I find it's a nice way to keep that part of my brain that does do figure drawing sharp. Part of it is also because I have been hard at work on assembling the trade paperback of of Volume 2 of Morning Stars, the book that's going to contain issues 5, 6, 7, and 8. And I find that when I'm doing that, it's really hard mentally for me to work on other projects, just to have an illustration that's going. Because I'm sort of writing, but I'm also mostly curating, going through, like what I'm doing now is I'm putting together the back matter. I've already assembled all of the pages in Affinity Publisher. So the actual story pages are already dropped into the template that I'm going to use to output the book. And the real challenge for me is just writing whatever additional text I want to have to go along with that that final chapter, with this final book. Writing any additional supplemental text that needs to go with it. Selecting the actual material. So it's sort of a weird half writing, half curating, creative project. But for some reason, it uses up a lot of mental resources. So I have found that as opposed to having an illustration going as a break, when I'm taking a break from doing this book assembly, just doing these studies of simple cubes and boxes is just, it's like somebody who goes running specifically to relieve stress. Like, it's an exercise. And some people, like, I could see an art student who wants to get on with, I want to make the coolest, baddest illustration ever. Or I want to draw like 1,000-page graphic novel. Whatever their ambitious, huge thing is that they want to work on. I can see them saying, yeah, drawing boxes and cylinders is boring. Teach me how to make something badass. But for me, I find doing fundamental studies to be incredibly relaxing. Because I know enough about drawing that I understand what I'm doing and why, but I haven't mastered it to the point where it's a waste of time for me. So when I'm drawing it, it's really just me looking for the mistakes. You know, like, I mean, there's still, even in this drawing, there's still plenty of mistakes. As much as I stretched the neck out, I feel like this neck could be even longer in terms of proportion. I'm still trying to master something that gives me the perfect sense of what happens with the deltoid, both in terms of it stretching over the top of the arm, but then also having the pecs go in. Like if I'm drawing just anatomy on top of the box, I know what the anatomy is, but trying to get it to feel as convincing on top of this structure is what's challenging for me. More often than not, when I'm figure drawing, I don't necessarily go in and draw all these cylinders. I'll go from that stick figure that's above to just adding anatomy on top of that. And what I find is that I get muscles that look like they're in the right place, but they don't feel like they're wrapping around the actual limbs. And that's the reason why something as simple as going from the stick version up here to a volumetric version, that's why this feels like such a valuable study for me personally. And I'm not saying this like, oh, this is what you have to do to be a great artist. But I mentioned the art book study group that we do on Patreon twice a month, and the next session is actually tomorrow. Tomorrow it's Monday nights at 7 p.m. Pacific Standard. The whole point of the art book study group is me sharing how I study art. It's not necessarily an educational course unto itself, but it's me looking at educational material that is intended for artists and showing how I absorb it, how I analyze it, how I break it down. And that is part and parcel of what I'm doing here. This is almost like a semi preview of art book study group in a way. I'm not using the book that we've been studying, which is Walt Reed's The Figure. But what I am doing is I'm sitting down with educational material, being the Charles Bargue Drawing Course, and I'm going through how I try to analyze and understand what's in that book. So for me, the big thing is it's not just, oh, this is how you draw the muscles of the anatomy, or this is how you render it. It's how do the forms that you're drawing, how does the anatomy realistically interact with those forms? How do you make it convincing? It's one thing to be able to draw convincing muscles. It's another thing to be able to draw convincing volumes. But I find that one of the areas that I still struggle with is making the anatomy and these simple volumes interact. Now, I could go on and draw in more muscles on top of this and develop this further. But I find, like I said, in terms of like relaxing and just meditating on this process, this is actually about as far as I've been going. Like I have pages and pages and pages of these studies that I've been doing over the past week while I'm working on the Morningstar book, the volume 2. So let me just group these two together and turn those off, and let's bring in another drawing. Let me go back to my gallery real quick, because I don't understand why it didn't bring in those other drawings. Let's see here. Where are the rest of the Bargue drawings? Probably down here somewhere. All right, here we go. Where was okay? Let's take this one. All right. So this guy Just gonna move him over to the side. I'll make him a little bit smaller there because I'm gonna, like I mentioned, I'm just going to draw this once in a stick figure form and then once a little bit more cylindered out. Now this is a very different illustration from the other one, that the other Bargue drawing that was all rendered out. This one is really just him limiting it to line and just trying to use as few lines as possible to really express the gesture, the volume, and the anatomy. All right. I have to make these lines a little bit darker. So just so you know, this is darker than I want to be drawing. Realistically, I actually want to draw very light when I'm blocking these things in. But since I'm drawing in front of you guys, I want you to actually be able to get something out of this by seeing what I'm doing. So I'm making it a little bit darker. So for me, I'm paying attention to things like when I look at the back side of this guy, the fact that we're seeing the buttocks instead of the crotch is telling us that his back is turned towards us. Because when you look up towards the top of this drawing, his torso is twisting, and when you get to when you're at the bottom, you're still seeing his back. But by the time you get, we move him forward a little bit, lean him forward a little bit more. By the time you get to the front, up to the top, to the collarbone, you're seeing the front because he's twisting. And this is something that's also important to pay attention to in terms of the difference between, your backside of your form and your front side of the form. Being able to identify those things is important. And when I'm drawing these kinds of box studies, those differences, those differentiations are one of the big things that I'm chasing. Because I'm just trying to think of all of this stuff, not as flat, but as three-dimensional objects. Jay King's in the chat, says, what's good, brother and people? It's all good. We're in here doing some studies from Charles Bargue, from the Bargue Drawing Course. And I'm doing very simple, just boxes, stick figures, and cubes. Because to me, this is the most fundamental of the fundamentals. And I'm looking at this guy, and we're looking at him, we're seeing the back of his head. It's not like a 3/4 back, it's just a little bit more of a back than a profile. And it looks like we're looking at kind of the underside. Nah, it's about like a full-on side view. So it's a profile in terms of like, I guess what I'm trying to express is, are we looking down at his head, or are we looking up at his head? And we're looking pretty much at a profile, but it's a profile that's just ever so slightly turned away. Not a 3/4 like you're looking over his shoulder, just turned away a little bit. Then just, you know what? I realized I started drawing this and not putting it on a separate layer. So let's cut, paste, and that should give me a new layer. There we go. You know, I realize as I'm doing these, I forgot to mention the other reason why I am intentionally drawing each of these twice, where I'm drawing the version without the cylinders first, is because I need a reminder for myself of what I should keep my gestures limited to. Because, you know, like I said, I'll go a lot of times from jumping right to the gesture, from the gesture into the anatomy. I don't necessarily spend as much time building up the volume. And you, at some point, you like, it's good to have such a strong understanding of volume mentally that you don't necessarily need to draw out all of those construction lines. It's a good thing to be able to do that. But I think when you haven't mastered it, you sometimes create problems for yourself. And the point of me drawing a simple stick figure with a couple of boxes as a starting point, what that does for me is it reminds me this is where I need to fix the pose. Like if I were doing this in a figure drawing class and I got here, I would look at it and say, oh, wait, what's wrong with it? And I'd say, oh, that head needs to be, well, to be honest, I wouldn't, I was about to push the head down a little bit, but I realized I haven't actually drawn the shoulder coming over because I haven't converted it to a cylinder yet. I haven't gotten the part of here's where the shoulder is coming over, because the shoulder actually, the head still feels like it might need to be pushed down a little bit more. That neck feels like it might need to be angled more, ever so slightly forward. Like that neck feels like it might need to be more like this, as opposed to the way that I have it drawn. I might look up and say, okay, here's where I have the hand position. If I were to drop a plumb line straight down, yeah, that's about right. I was gonna say that looks like the knee is too far forward, but if you look at this guy right here and you drop a plumb line, yeah, the knee is a little bit too forward. Now see, but if the knee is too forward, then what that tells me is that the whole torso needs to be leaned forward more, because yeah, the knee is too forward, but also if you drop a line from the elbow, yeah, this the torso should probably be a little bit further back, like maybe that much, so that we have the right length. So the point is for me to remember not to get too caught up in my gesture in terms of like start adding stuff, but to at that simple stage say, all right, what needs to be fixed here? Now, instead of fixing all of this, I could sit here and redraw all that. But like I said, if I'm going to go ahead and just do this again for a version to draw, to add the volumes of cylinders to, I think it makes sense to just try and look at this next sketch of me redrawing the boxes as me taking a second better stab at the proportion. Mighty Geek refers to what I was talking about with the upper torso. He says it's what Todd McFarlane calls twist perspective. So yeah, it's very useful to be able to understand not just an object in perspective, but how to have an object turning in perspective, to have it moving, changing direction. So we're going to try this again, and I'm going to move this now. I intentionally drew the first one a little bit lower so I could draw this one with him a little bit higher. And that way I can have that arm reaching out without having this canvas be as long as as the space might need. So even this right here, I feel like I put too many lines into this beginning. It should be cleaner and simpler. And I also realize that I'm drawing it too close to the edge because I need room to have that other leg going backward. So I'm just going to erase that whole thing. And let's try this again. And this is, this goes back to what we were talking about when we first started, how a lot of people don't necessarily want to do this kind of study of simple shapes and forms. I mean, one, okay, yeah, I spent a few minutes drawing a couple of boxes and they didn't come out right. It's not a big deal to just erase that, go back and take another shot at it. But two, for me, most of the drawings that I do require me to do, it's very, very rare for something to come out looking the way I want it on the first pass. Usually when I do, I'm actually a little bit more suspicious of those drawings. I'm wondering, okay, what am I missing here? Because nothing ever comes that easy. So I am very suspicious of a drawing that is fairly accurate right from the jump. And also, like I mentioned here before, in my gesture stage, I'll usually just indicate the hands and feet at first as a simple line. And then when I come in and add boxes and cylinders, that's when I'll flesh them out a little bit more. Not happy with this box. And until I'm happy with this box, there's not much point in adding all of the other stuff. So this guy feels like he's leaning forward a little bit more. Also looking at the fact that you've got the pelvis going up, and as you go through here, you've got the top of the shoulder. You almost run a line through here and say, all right, I know where the peak of my shoulder is going to be. So I've got to try and get that corner moving even more forward. That corner of the cube. So in this case, there's a lot of twist going on here with that torso. So you've really only got the pelvis as more of a stable box. The rib cage is really a twisty box in this case. Then from here, we'll have that arm come down and out, forming a simple triangle between that. I am going to take this other drawing and just drag it down out of the way. So I've got some room. Screw it, shrink it down. It's not that important. Maybe next time I'll have to remember to start with a tinier sketch. Maybe treat it like a thumbnail, that first volumetric, that first just study of the cubes of the torso. The hand is kind of pointing to the elbow. Something else that's interesting that I've noticed is even when you're trying to focus on the gesture and the study and getting the proportions right, oddly enough, if I look at the reference too much and I try to draw what I'm seeing, I lose the feel of the gesture. Whereas if I look at that drawing and I treat it the same way you would look at a figure drawing model, where let's say you're in a class with a figure drawing model, I think most of you, if you've taken any figure drawing classes, you've heard your instructors say you don't want to copy the model, you want to capture the feel of what they're doing. The same thing I have found is also true when I'm doing these studies, is that if I'm just looking at the drawing and trying to get all of the parts in the right place, like the one-to-one, this lines up to that, frequently I'll end up with a very stiff drawing that does not come out very well. Whereas if instead I'm really focused on what does the drawing feel like? What is the thing that I'm doing the study from? If I can capture that sense of gesture of that reference that I'm working from, I get something that, even if it doesn't look 100% accurate in terms of the proportions, I get a result that feels more like the thing that I was studying from. And that's really interesting. Much like the idea of drawing a picture, a portrait that doesn't necessarily look photographically perfect. If you were doing just a drawing or a sketch of a friend, or even a detailed portrait, that when you try to draw an exact replica, photorealistic likeness, that sometimes, or often actually, trying to make it an exact replica fails, where trying to make something feel like a person, feel like the essence of that person, that's where the success seems to lie. And it's just odd to me that the same thing is true, not just when drawing from humans, but also when drawing from the reference of other artistic works. I am noticing that this hand looks like, this arm looks like it's a little too long. That hand actually feels like it should be back, well, maybe just a little bit further back. Maybe that much. But yeah, it feels like that same phenomena that's true of drawing humans is true for doing studies. At least it feels that way for me. And what's interesting also is that in the previous drawing, I felt like the neck was too short, whereas in this one, I am concerned that the neck is a little too long. And I think what's particularly challenging right here, and I think it is challenging in general, is when you're trying to create a sense of volume, but you're looking at a cylinder that is in complete profile. See, what's interesting here is I'll show you in comparison between the two legs. The leg that is closest to us as a viewer, to me, looks like it is in true profile. Whereas the leg that is farther away is, we're looking at it from the back. In fact, if I were, instead of drawing a cylinder, if I were to draw this as a rectangle to show you that it's going downward and away from us, but it is going slightly forward in terms of the figure's body. In relationship to the figure's pelvis, it's moving slightly forward, but it's mostly moving down and away from us. Like if I were to give you an underside here. So that's moving in that direction. Whereas if I were to convert this to the same thing, what you would be seeing is a little bit of the underside and a little bit of the top, because it's actually a cylinder. But for the most part, we're looking at it as a profile. I do find that drawing things that are in profile, they give you a strong silhouette, but I feel like it also makes it more challenging to really create that sense of three-dimensional volume, because the way that objects turn, volume just feels like it is more apparent in three-quarter angles, which is why three-quarter angles are so popular. It feels like volumes are far more apparent in three-quarters than in profiles or straight-on angles. And I'm putting more anatomy on this than I have been in terms of doing these studies. Generally speaking, I've been trying to keep these studies to, for something like the feet, to just try to treat them like big wooden blocks. But I do find that like putting just a little bit of the muscles of like the buttocks onto the cube helps to enforce that sense of volume. I mean, this is probably about the most anatomy I would probably put on something like this, except for also coming into, say, the forearms. I find that the things that really help sell it for me is creating the forearms and how the muscles of both the flexors and extensors reach over the the extensors reaching over the outside of the elbow, and the flexors, the extensors on the outside and the flexors on the inside. Those help give a sense of something moving around the form. And then also the shoulders, even though this doesn't necessarily have the, I feel like this is straying away from what Bargue, particularly in his drawings, is trying to convey. He's leaving as much open as possible. But in terms of just defining forms, I'm coming in here and trying to draw that shoulder wrapping the deltoid muscle wrapping around the top of the arm. And I try to think of it, and I've mentioned this, I think, in other live streams, as like a bridge that's hopping over that cylinder. So if you look at where the cylinder meets, let me zoom in here. Let's make this smaller. If I erase a little bit of what I have drawn here, and redraw it again just for clarifications. I really didn't need to do that. I could have just switched colors and just drawn over it in red. I realize that now. But, so you've got like that box with the torso as I defined it. You've got this slight ellipse. Although I would probably draw it so that you wouldn't even see that ellipse, because it would be going all the way past the corner of the box. Like it would be going behind here, so that's attaching. Point being is that mentally I've been thinking more about the shoulder as, yes, it's a muscle that's doing work and it's flexing, but also thinking about it as it connecting over here on the arm and saying, all right, it's a bridge that's running from here over. And then looking at the from the inside, having the where it connects and is going into the bone, to have that kind of aiming at the center of the bridge. And then on the underside, having the latissimus pulling forward. And then the same kind of bridge as I mentioned with the extensors and flexors, having those just reaching over the cylinder. All right, so I think that I'm going to do one more and then call it a day, because we're already past an hour here. But I have a lot of book layout left in front of me. And believe it or not, I'm pretty good at not procrastinating. But I do find it's not that I dislike doing the book layout. It's just it just doesn't energize me the way that just doing simple volumetric studies like I'm doing here. This is one of those things that it puts a lot of energy into me. You know, it fills my creative tank. Just doing very simple studies of volume and gesture. So let me group these, turn that off, and pick one more. Oh. Let's see here. Let's take this guy. All right. Move this over here. That's an idea. I am going to do the first little simple gesture, and I'm going to shrink it, move it out of the way while I draw the second one. So looking just at boxes. Sometimes I start with the, there's different ways to start even. Sometimes I start with either the rib cage box, the upper torso, or I'll start with the pelvis box. Sometimes I'll start with just a line kind of blocking in the general direction that the two, oh wait, let me switch back to a lighter opacity. Sometimes I'll start with just a line kind of describing both of them in terms of like which way each one is tilted. But this simple abstract shape here, for me, the next goal is what direction are the primitives facing? So the rib cage, it looks like we are looking up at him and he's slightly bent backwards. I'm looking to figure out where is the front, where's the line between the front plane and the side plane. So I'm actually changing this angle a little bit. The pelvis seems like it's dipping down, but not way down. Dipping forward, but not way forward. So sometimes I'll start by looking at the panels that are when I say panels, the faces of the box that are not the dominant face. So the dominant, like maybe we're looking at the front of the figure or the back of the figure. Maybe if it's a profile, then the side is the dominant plane. But sometimes I will figure out the non-dominant plane, the top or the side. Figuring out those first, I'll look at what's left, and that becomes the front plane. So sometimes I'm conceiving these things by deduction. And when I say deduction, I don't mean like Sherlock Holmes, like mystery deduction. I mean by reducing and removing, looking at the other things that I do know, which is in a way abstractly similar to the Sherlock Holmesy process. I feel like I want to shift this a little bit more. I feel like I want to have the pelvic box shifted slightly to the left and angled a little bit more. And this is more of what I mentioned earlier about drawing what it feels like versus what it looks like. But it also feels like this could be a little bit longer. The rib cage could be a little bit longer. I don't want to go too long because if I'm drawing him twisting back and away from us, there's going to be some foreshortening here. And drawing it too long can get away from that. In fact, I think that now I have the boxes correctly, but I feel like they're not drawn close enough. I need to bring this up a little bit. Now from here, it's eyeballing where the head goes and then adding just stick figures. So the head itself, it looks like it is, it's interesting what the head is doing because the head looks actually like, you know what, it'll be easier with a box instead of using that cube that I have, that skull that I have. My little blocks here. This is what I'm looking for. So what's interesting is that the head in this drawing, as I'm looking at it, it seems to be looking forward, but it's rotated to the side and it's angled up. So it's not like we're looking at a one that's turned to the left or the right. We're looking at one that's just looking, like if you were to take this and just turn it so it's looking up at you, but still looking from like straight forward, it's like that. It just happens to be rotated in such a way that's a little bit of an odd angle, and it might throw you off. So those are the kind of things that I try to be aware of when I'm blocking in the rest of this, when I'm blocking in the head part now. And part of the reason for doing these kind of mindless, somewhat exercises, I don't call them mindless, I am supposed to be paying attention, is trying to reduce the number of lines it takes for me to do that. I shouldn't have to draw that with like a bunch of lines, drawing it over and over and over again. I should be able to just draw one line, it's accurate, and then move on to the next thing I'm drawing. So, hey, Negro Frazetta's in the chat. He says, I did not know where you live. Yes, I live in LA. So I work in the toy industry. Most of the toy companies are in Southern California. Most of the U.S., the major U.S. toy companies. I mean, Hasbro is their home base is in Rhode Island, but even Hasbro had an office out here for a while. I don't know if the office is still there, but you know, for part of their intellectual property development, as they've moved Transformers and a lot of their stuff, the My Little Ponies and all those, to doing more Hollywood work in this era of Marvel Studios and DC movies. I think that maybe they thought it might behoove them to have a presence out here in LA. So from here, I'm just drawing. I'm imagining that I can see through. I'll just draw it as a dotted line because you're not going to see it if I draw it as lightly. But that dotted line, oh, I can't even draw a dotted line today. What's going on? That the hip is attaching on the hidden side. The same with this, on this hip, the leg is actually, the pelvis is facing us, like turned slightly so we can see that side. What's interesting is this leg is coming straight down, maybe a little bit forward, but mostly straight down, and the foot turned. Whereas with this one, the leg is moving backwards in space. So I'm actually looking at where the foot is, the foot that's forward, I'm looking at where that is and saying, all right, the foot of the other leg is actually a little bit behind that. So even though the plane that this is coming from is turned towards us, the leg is going to be moving away. And that will look, that's one of those where drawing the cylinder makes that, sells that a lot better. So Negro Frazetta asks, the Walt Reed torso is really hard. Is it necessary? Well, here's the question. Okay, Walt Reed, the way he does the torso actually is not very different. I'm doing boxes, but I actually think the Walt Reed torso is even simpler than what I do, because the Walt Reed torso is 2 glasses. He has, his concept is, let's say you've got 2 cups. You've got like a, maybe not a highball glass, but you've got like a tall drinking glass, and then you've got like a shorter glass, like a whiskey glass. Both round, not square. To me, and you tell me if you feel like in our studies, if it seems like this is different from what Walt Reed has been explaining. Because for me, even this tall glass is probably a little too tall. For me, I see Walt Reed's torso as just 2 glasses. So if I were doing Walt Reed's version of this, it would just be line going that way, ellipse, ellipse, line going this way. And then for the lower torso, it would just be ellipse, turn the other way, and glass, and glass. Darken this a little bit. So I actually feel like the Walt Reed torso is even easier than the boxes that I've been drawing. I mean, the reason why I'm using boxes is because I'm also trying to really emphasize that that difference between the front planes and the side planes and the top planes. And that's my own personal study. It's something that I want to be aware of. That's why I'm practicing this. Oh, Nico Frissett is talking about the torso on page 14 of Walt Reads the Figure. Let me grab the book and take a look. Page 14. You know what? I see the figure that he's talking about here. And hang on, I'm going to bring it up on screen so everyone else in the live stream can see as well. Give me a second here. But before we get into that, well, you know what? What I would do is move past the take a look at page 20 of Walt Reed, because that's what I would focus on. Don't even look at if the one on page 14 is too complicated, look at the one on page 20. So let me bring these up on screen for you guys. So this is the thing that's on page 14 of Walt Reads the Figure. And, it's kind of abstract. It's not a simple egg shape. It's not a box. He's showing you how the heads break down. And it is not a specific, it's not a simple shape. It's sort of a weird, it's kind of got that glass thing, but it's rounded at the top. It's got the cutouts for the arms. So it's a little bit hard to, I think, wrap someone's mind around. However, flipping over a couple of pages to page 20, he's still using that shape. But what he starts with first is these two drinking glasses. And this literally, what he's showing here, this is exactly what I'm talking about. You've got the two drinking glasses, the tall one and the short one. And he uses that to help break down the relationship between the rib cage and the pelvis. And then he draws in that form that you were looking at on page 14. For me, I don't use this step 4. What I do is I use step 3. I start with step 3 in terms of just work out that relationship in simple forms between the rib cage and the pelvis. And then after that, I may decide to use boxes. Most frequently, I use boxes. Sometimes I'll use circular shapes. I'll use spheres, but put this book down somewhere it's out of the way. But more often than not, let me go back to our old friend Procreate. More often than not, I will, after I've drawn the boxes, then I will just take the box, and in the box, I will cut out attachments for the leg. Let me draw a center line. So I'll just cut out a space for the legs to attach, and then I'll put in this case, this leg is heading away from us. So I'll put the cylinder in. And then in this case, the leg is moving just sort of straight down. So you'll see the top of the cylinder, but not a lot of it. It'll be pretty thin. And this way of doing it, you can do the exact same thing. Like over here I did the glasses. You can just draw a center line down where you've decided the front of that shape is, and then just add a cutout for the legs. You can do that with the glasses approach as well. And I think the more confusing part of the that thing that you were drawing from page 14 is the shoulders. You can do the exact same thing where you can just draw a cutout up here and just say, all right, this is where the shoulders are going to go. You've got your center line of your rib cage, and you would probably be seeing less of the ellipse on the right side of the shoulder. This would be shorter. You'd see less of it. And draw a neck hole in there. So really, if you're going to practice kind of the primitive structures, use what's on page 20 as your basis. Don't use the one on page 14. Again, I don't think that it's, Walt redid it for a reason, which is to show you how to, showing you something that's a little bit more specific. But I find it much more useful to draw the less specific, the general boxes or just simple glasses. And even with this box, you can go with the box and just give it a cutout and say, all right, the shoulders are going to cut across here at the top. Even this, I know for a fact that, yeah, the rib cage, this whole box makes up the rib cage. But if you draw a center line down here, halfway down that center line, you're going to get the split where the rib cage splits in half. All of these things, I'm not going into that kind of detail with the studies that I'm doing, but all of these, the box studies or the ellipses or drawing them as drinking glasses, these are just general shapes for you to start adding on to. Like like you're working on a sculpture, and the simple block that you first draw in, that's just to get you to the place where you can begin adding volume and anatomy in more detail. That's the purpose for these things. So I'm going to take this one. You know what? We're already at almost an hour and a half. I've been saying for a long time that I've just been, you know what? Screw it. I'm going to stick with what I've been doing. So I'm going to take this sketch that I just did. I'm going to shrink it down, kind of put it out of the way somewhere, maybe over here. Maybe up here. And now I'm going to come in and draw, let me make this even smaller. You know what? I'm just going to turn that off. Create a new layer. But I'm going to come back in here and draw this now with the legs as cylinders. So I'm going to go back to somewhat lighter opacity. Oh, Negro Fazetta also asks, where is the photo ref from? This is something called the Charles Bargue Drawing Course. So the point of the Bargue Drawing Course is that the Bargue Drawing Course really is a sight-size drawing course. Even when you're doing studies from these drawing plates, all the examples they have in the book, you're meant to put them up on a wall, flat, to take your artwork and put it on a drawing board and try to have it as parallel to the surface of the wall that's hanging on. And then you're meant to do the sight size measurement and copy the drawing one for one. I don't study that way. I'm not a sight size person. I'm not against sight size, but sight size isn't as useful for imaginative drawing, which is what a lot of comic book artwork and animation artwork is done for. So I don't use the site size method. However, the collection of drawings in that book are still fantastic. That's why I have the book. And you've also mentioned wanting to learn how to render better. The Bargue method does get very detailed into rendering. So you know what? On our Discord server for the Patreon subscribers, I will drop some of the images from there. And that might be interesting for you to check out. Meanwhile, let me wrap this last study up, and then we're going to call it a day. So really the interesting thing is, even though I'm not drawing the spine here, my whole goal in this first section is just creating an interesting relationship between three boxes. The box that makes up the rib cage, the box that makes up the pelvis, and the box that makes up the head. And you can draw these things as various types of spheres, egg shapes. There's all sorts of ways to conceive of these different forms. And then from here, I'm just looking up and seeing about where the elbow is placed in terms of how much higher than the top of the head the elbow is, and then also how far out it is from the rib cage. And it looks like it could be a little bit further out. So just simple stick figures for that. This is kind of parallel. But this could be maybe a little bit longer. Something that normally I used to start all my drawings by making a line. I still kind of, I still use this method quite a bit, but I would start with a line and say, here's the head and the foot, and then here's where the center of the figure is. When I've been working off of the rib cage like this, I'll look at that head, and I'll look at the base of the pelvis, and I'll kind of like drop another line sometimes and say, all right, what's something that's about the equidistant? And then I'll say, all right, see, this is how I know that my feet are a little bit too short, or my legs are a little bit too short. So I look at this, and I compare this with the upper torso. And yes, it's leaning back. So even this might still be a little bit short. This is just helping me figure out where to put the feet. So I can erase that there. And normally these lines, I wouldn't, to be accurate, if I'm really drawing, like if I'm in a figure drawing class or I'm working on something, it's not that I'm going to erase these lines. I'm going to knock them back in opacity. What I would normally do is just draw them very lightly, just enough so that I can see them. Like, it looks like I'm kind of erasing, but if I zoom in, you can still faintly see these marks. Those measurement marks that I made. That's what I usually do. And when you've been drawing for years and you've really mastered proportion, you don't need to make those marks. You just get it right mentally and you just draw, you just put the lines where they need to be. That's where you get to artists where everything they draw looks like magic. They're not doing magic. They're doing exactly what I'm doing right now. The difference is they're doing it in their head. Like we've talked about this with Kim Jong-il. He does all of what I'm doing. He just does it in his head so that all he needs to draw is the finished line. That's what experience does. That's what years of observation and study and working from models and practice, that's what all of that does. It gives you the capacity to do what I'm doing right now mentally, as opposed to doing it on the actual drawing like I am. But that's also the hope of doing studies like these. My goal in doing studies like these is to internalize the exercise that I'm doing over enough time that I will begin to be able to do it. Like, remember this way, I am capable of doing a drawing without doing the actual underdrawing, and I'm just doing this work mentally. It doesn't come out as well as it does when I do the underdrawings. It doesn't, muscles look a little bit wonky, anatomy is a little bit more off, but I'm capable of doing it. However, the more years that I spend doing studies like this and that I do the underdrawings, the more I internalize it, with the goal being that eventually I will internalize it so well that I won't need to draw any of the construction. And someday I'll be one of those guys who looks like a drawing wizard, where I'm just magicking stuff up and drawing it. And they're like, how does he get everything in the right place? How does the anatomy look like it's wrapping around the forearms? How does all that happen? It happens. I'm not saying there aren't people out there that are freaks of nature who just have an incredible grasp of anatomy and proportion, volume naturally. That exists. That's a real thing. There are people who can really do that. But very few working professional artists are that person. Very few. Most, the predominant number of artists that you admire, whose work you like and who you want to be like, they learned this. They learned this by doing a ton of studies. And that's what I'm doing. And even though I'm not a sight size person, sight size people, it still takes a long time to get good at sight size. It still takes a long time to refine your sense of visual measurement. And again, just like with people that do more of constructive drawing versus sight size drawing, there are people out there who do have a natural, better sense of sight size than people who study it. But for all artists, whatever your approach to drawing is, whether you're doing photorealistic or whether you're doing cartooning, whether you're doing sight size or you're constructing everything, the majority of artists have to work to develop this skill, their skill, whatever their drawing approach. And honestly, the approach that you choose, because some people don't know which approach is the right one for them, it's really a matter of what you want to use the approach for. If you want to do drawings where you have to make stuff up, then you probably need constructive drawing. If you want to do realism, photorealism, hyper photorealism, you want to do portraits or landscapes, then sight size is probably more beneficial for you. And I think that it is also beneficial for people who practice one to still study the other. I haven't really put into any type of in-depth time into sight size, but sight size is a useful tool. So I'm not saying that even though I am a constructive drawing artist, that I will never use sight size. That would be a falsehood. And also, someone who is a sight size artist, I'm not saying that they should never, ever practice or study constructive drawing. I think that an artist, it behooves you to know how to do both, regardless of which you're going to use. Let's see here. Negro Frazetta asks, if you could only pick one course, Glenn Villepeu or Walt Reed to figure. Well, I will tell you that I have taken a Glenn Villepeu course, and I've taken a workshop. So I've actually, instead of working from the courses that he sells, I've taken a workshop in person with him. It was like a one-day intensive. I definitely think I learned a lot from being in person with him. But I feel like I've probably spent more time. That's the thing. I can't compare what Vilpu's courses are like. I can only compare an in-person class with him. So I've spent a lot of time with Walt Reed, and my instinct is to go with Walt Reed because I've learned so much from it. But who's to say that if I bought the Vilpu courses, that I might, because of how great my experience was with his workshop, it's very possible that I might greatly prefer the Vilpu workshops to the Reed book. But his courses are more expensive than the Walt Reed book, so I've just been working with, what's in my budget. It is possible to go broke just spending money on courses and classes. So I do try to limit myself to the things. I do try to be budget-minded. Oh, as I'm looking at this connected now, this really looks bad. Like right here, this relationship between where the rib cage ends and then coming straight down to the pelvis. Maybe I just dropped the pelvis too much. That might be it, because this looks really, really bad. This really looks like it should be more, just draw that straight across. Like maybe just angle just a tiny bit. And that would change this angle over here as well. Yeah, erasing all of that. So I think that I got caught up a little bit into the contrapposto of it all, trying to create twisting and turning of form. But yeah, sometimes you get pretty far in a drawing. Part of this is also hopefully to be able to see things like that early on in the drawing, as opposed to not seeing it until I'm just sitting here adding cylinders and such. But yeah, I exaggerated it a bit too much. And to be honest, it feels like I maybe made the division between the upper torso and lower torso. I made it too much of a division, because looking at this now, it almost feels like if I were to just draw the front surface of the entire torso, upper torso and lower torso, it feels like the entire surface goes like this. And there's more of a flattening out towards the bottom. When I say flattening out, meaning as opposed to being up at that angle, it feels like by the time you get to the bottom, there's less of that and more of this. So if I'm just drawing the front, not even the side of the boxes, it feels like you've got this, and then when you get to the rib cage, that's where you're getting the angle. And now that I'm drawing the sides and bottoms on here, that feels more like this. Again, these are things that I may not have studied and observed on my own, but that's the point of doing these studies, is to sit there, do a drawing, look at it, and then developing your own ability to critique your work, to look at it and see how things are wrong. In fact, John Ursick just popped into the chat. He said, plumb line the right shoulder and see how far away the hip is from it. Good point. Yeah, so if you go to the right shoulder, drop a plumb line down from the hip. Actually, I like doing the opposite, which is I look at the one that's inside and I draw a plumb line up to see if it hits. Like in this, on mine, the plumb line seems to hit pit of the neck. So if I go here and I draw a plumb line way, way away from the pit of the neck. So I've exaggerated by a large degree how far I've got the body angled. So these are all things that, John came in with a very simple suggestion, and I'm looking at it, I'm like, oh, wow, that's way off. So I see Cassiel's in the chat. He says he's back. Hello, everyone. Let's see here. Let me go back. John Nusick says you need to tilt the upper torso away from you. It's tilted to the right too much. He said, sorry to drop an observation and run, but that's what I see. No problem, man. It's a good point, and I was missing it. And that's, you know, that's helpful to have an extra pair of eyes that you can just come in and say, hey, that's off. So Negro Frazetta says, what are some books not written by Villepeu, but is his method of figure drawing? Well, that's a good question. I'm trying to remember, because the Villepeu workshop I took was like almost a decade ago that I took that class. I haven't taken a class with him since. It's just been that one time. I don't know his method well enough that I feel like I can accurately express it. I mean, I definitely feel like there is some Bridgman in there. Probably a lot of Andrew Loomis, really. Yeah, Andrew Loomis's figure drawing, for all it's worth, is probably what I would look at. But I mean, again, it's been so long since I've taken the taken that class. I feel I would be doing a disservice to Glenn Villepeu by trying to just whittle down his instruction method to some other artist's figure instruction method when I am not as familiar with his work as I should be. So, I mean, if you want to take a Villepeu course, just take a Villepeu course. Let's see. He also mentions drawing lessons from the great masters by Robert Beverly Hale. This is a good reference book at studying the Villepeu's course. Yes. Got it right here in my my stack of art books and my my immediate reference book. So yeah, it's a great book. Yes, I've got that one. I actually have 3 Robert Beverly Hale books, but the other 2 are books that are compilations made by students of his later on, like I think after he passed. So the one that really is written by him is that that main one that I just showed. It may be possible only one of them is a compilation, but all of them, the artwork that's in there is great to study from. Like I'm just the study that I'm doing right here off of this Charles Bargue drawing. This is exactly what I would do with Robert Beverly Hale books. Is just going through and just looking at the work and doing simple studies. So let's take another shot at this, and this time not exaggerating that twist. Or at least not exaggerating that lean. Like the figure is leaning, but not as much as I drew it. Like if I were to, again, draw that plumb line up, even this, I've got it too much. And plumb lines, that's something that not just sight size, but that's something that this all started with me doing a study from the Bargue method. Plumb lines are a big part of the Bargue method. So the plumb line is just a vertical line to help you try and figure out where something lines up. That's all it is. So let's see here. Negro Fazetta asks, can you share your thoughts on the drawing lessons from The Great Masters by Robert Beverly Hale? Well, my thoughts on it are that it's an excellent book, and it's on my list of stuff once we finish Walt Reed to do art book study group on. It's a great collection of works of the old masters, And what it does is Robert Beverly Hale goes through the book and just shows you these are great master drawings on gesture. These are great master drawings on anatomy. These are great master drawings on the head, the foot, whatever. And then he'll go through, and in the text part next to the drawings, he'll describe what it is that these old masters understand about these elements and why they're great drawings. So he's trying to show you by example. So is that sort of what you were looking for? Because I highly recommend them. Like I said, I've got 3 of his books, and they all have tons of great material in there. But the one that you mentioned specifically is definitely my favorite. And you can treat that exactly the way that you would treat something like Walt reads The Figure, just going through it and just doing studies one by one. And in fact, at some point, we're going to do that. So let's see here. I see Help Me, I Need a Lamborghini is in a chat. I love that username. It says, hello, artistic friends. I just dropped by before bed. It's 21:45 Greenwich Mean Time. To say how much I love this show. I'm studying anatomy hard so I can draw my own comic book. Cheers. Well, cheers to you. Thank you for popping in. We're actually not going to be up much longer. I'm just trying to finish this study, and then we're going to call it a day, because we're already coming close to 2 hours here. This head is too big. That's a little better. If I were to draw a plumb line up from here, elbow's a little bit out past that, so I can just... Now see, this is where sight size really comes in handy. Because just that act of drawing a plumb line to get things more in perspective. I can drop a line down from the hip, and I know that the ankle will be significantly behind that. The ankle is over here. The ankle is almost right underneath the crotch. So we put that down there. I know that the foot is out to the side. In fact, let me draw, if I draw a line up from the heel, that's still pretty far away from everything else. I feel like John has shamed me into using plumb lines. Plumb lines are valuable. I haven't been using them because I'm trying to, I guess, develop my freehand sense of getting proportion and volume down. But much like drawing boxes and cubes and simple cylinders to figure out and improve your sense of construction, I may have a long way to go before I can just do this like correcting proportion freehand. I'm improving my perception of these things. Let me make this a little bit darker so I'm not drawing as many lines. Put this a little bit below here. So I'm improving, but it looks like I'm not at the point, I'm still at the point where, a good plumb line every now and then can make a big difference in terms of helping me make these more accurate. So let's see. Help I Need a Lamborghini says, Jeremy, ever tried drawing directly without under construction like Kim Jong-il? Just try for an exercise. It's a great exercise, you know, take the pen and whatever comes out. I have sketchbooks full of horrible direct drawings in ink. So yes, I do it. I still do it. I'm not anti-drawing directly. I do these drawings with all the construction lines to help improve my craft and my observation. You know, that was something that I talked about, was the fact that Kim Jong-il, I don't know for sure if he has been drawing direct his entire life or whether he started out doing what I'm doing, you know, learning construction and then eventually getting rid of the construction lines. But for me, I do the construction lines so that hopefully when I sit down to do a drawing directly, I have all of this in my head and I've mastered the ability to do it. And I can mentally project that onto the page. So yes, I definitely think that drawing directly is very useful and it's a great exercise. So I'm almost done here. Just need to get the arms. I might add a little bit, just a tad bit of anatomy. But again, this whole thing that I was looking at before when I was comparing Walt Reed's drinking glasses, the same thing that was happening with the relationship between the upper torso and the lower torso. It's the same thing that's happening between the upper and lower arms. That you've got these two cylinders that are turning away from each other. Let's see here. Help Me says, sure, just a suggestion. I tried it. It was hard the first time. Kim used to draw construction in his early years, but prefers direct drawing because it's faster. Yeah, no, I completely agree. Direct drawing is much faster. But as you can see, when I need a plumb line, and I can, you know, my friends come in and pop in and point out how horribly off a relationship between the upper torso and lower torso is, and that's with construction. I look at it more like direct drawing is something that is there to be explored, but working on the fundamentals in the manner that I'm currently working is the thing that is giving me more improvement. So, I mean, I will get there. I'll get there to the point where I can do direct drawing. I mean, like I said, I've done direct drawing in ink. The other thing is that I probably, if I were going to be doing it, I would probably need to not be live streaming because it would take a lot more concentration to do it. Kim Jong-il can do it while he's talking to a lot of people and he draws in front of an audience. For me, considering how much concentration it takes to work through, like I can do constructive drawing here because I'm working through the process. I'm can literally just narrate to you, oh, I need to move this here, I need to do that there. Most of me talking is me sharing my inner monologue of me working my way through the drawing. I think for direct drawing, the amount of imagination that I would need in terms of really just projecting mentally where the positions are, where forms and volumes should be, would use up the part of my brain that talks. I wouldn't be able to talk while I do it. And much in the way that the shoulders are kind of a bridge between the torso and the arm, so the buttocks and the hip flexors are for the thighs and the legs. So yeah, this I think pretty much does it. And yeah, this is my process of just doing studies to work on. I'm working on primitive shapes, working on turning cubes and looking at them from different angles, drawing cylinders from different angles, being able to draw ellipses and drawing them at different degrees to show you how much an ellipse is facing towards you versus away from you. Yeah, this for me, and you can do these kinds of master studies from something that's a more detailed, fully rendered drawing. You can do these from a photograph of a sculpture or real life study of a sculpture. You can do this from a painting of the old masters. This type of analysis and breaking down any visual thing you're looking at. And it's not just for humans. It's great for humans. We can do it with cars, buildings, environments, landscapes. This is probably one of the most important studying tools I have for myself to improve my craft as an artist. So, yeah, see, Lamborghini says yes. I've used I have the same. I used to concentrate so much on direct drawing, I couldn't listen to anything outside. It's kind of isolating. I prefer construction nowadays. Yeah, I mean, I like to listen to a lot of podcasts while I draw, and I feel like, that's one of the main things. I really enjoy having that kind of audio company on, or listening to an audiobook while I'm working. Direct drawing, and again, I think that that's developing a skill over time, that I can do it and not need that deep level of concentration. But yeah, so that is pretty much it for this live stream. Again, for anyone that's interested in getting in the art book study group, it's a lot of this, but working through a specific art book. In this case, it's Walt Reads the Figure we've been doing for several months now, and we're, I don't know, probably a third of the way through the book. We're going to finish the whole thing. But if you want to get in on that, you can become a Patreon subscriber. The next session is going to be live tomorrow at 7 p.m. Pacific Standard Time. And also, if you miss it, all of the previous art book study groups are archived. So you can check all those out at patreon.com/Jeremy. That's patreon.com/GERIMI. There's, I think probably 50 or 60 videos up there at this point for you to check out. And if you would like to get a free digital sketchbook, get work in progress animated GIFs and sketches delivered to your inbox once a month, along with little blog posts on my creative process and thoughts about my creative life, you can sign up for my monthly newsletter at newsletter.jeremy.net. That drops the first of each month. And if you'd like to purchase physical copies of my comics or read digitally on Kindle or Comixology, you can go to amazon.jeremy.net. You can pick up books like my first graphic novel, Eye of the Gods. It's a psychological thriller about a man cursed with visions he cannot control. You can pick up volume 1 of my comic book, Morning Star, Lucifer's Fall from Heaven, told as a Western. It's an 8-issue series. This book contains issues 1 through 4. We'll be having volume 2 out within the next couple months. I'm working on assembling that now. And if you'd like to pick up individual issues, the last issue of Morning Star is available in print. It's Morning Star issue 8. You can get that at jeremy.net. There's also links to get to Comixology for that if you want to read that digitally as well. Okay, everybody, thank you so much for joining us. It's been a long one, but I thought it's been really interesting. Like I said, these studies are very relaxing for me, so I enjoy them, even if I have to redraw them multiple times and move stuff around and try to figure them out. It's very fun and educational and strength building for me as well. So that's it for now. Go be creative.